Hey everybody, we're back with the Encyclopedia of the Ancient World, and today we're going to be talking about the kings or pharaohs and the people of early Egypt. And the kings, we call them kings, and they were believed to be of divine origins. Okay, Egypt was, their beliefs they were initially ruled by gods, Horus who ruled the earth, and Osiris who ruled the next world. Okay, and even though the kings were humans, they were believed to be the represented by the gods or for the gods. So the gods were put them there. So they had divine origins. So you had Horus, the spirit in the king while he was alive, and then Osiris, the spirit of the king when he was dead. So again, Horus ruled the earth and was supposed to be inside his kings as they were living on the earth. And then Osiris ruled the next world, and he was supposed to be in the kings when they were dead. And because of that, because they had this divine origin, because they were appointed and believed to be, put there by the gods and had the gods living in them, they had absolute power. What they said was the word and it had to happen. So much so that they were called Pharaoh. And why they were called Pharaoh is because people could not refer to them directly because they were too important. They couldn't speak their name. So they spoke of them as of the palace, or Per'ah, or Pharaoh, okay? So even though they could not speak their names, these pharaohs actually had two different names. One was known as the son of Ra name, or the name that they were given at birth by their parents, okay? Then they had what was called the Nizwabidi, and this was received name when they were crowned. So, again, two different names, but they weren't allowed to say, the people weren't allowed to say their names, so they were just called the Pharaoh. Or, and now we go back and have their names, and usually these names is their Nizwabidi name received when they were crowned. But keep that in mind, though, as you're looking at, when we talk about sometimes they're called this and sometimes they're called that they did have two names. So it's not two different people all the time. Sometimes it's the same person, but being referred to by their different names. So with that being said, the pharaohs also, wore the crown and regalia of being, the kings, the emperors, the rulers of the land. And they had from their traditional of having two different kingdoms, a lower Egypt and an upper Egypt, they had two different crowns. One was the red crown for lower Egypt. The other was the white crown for upper Egypt. And then when they had the combined kingdom, they had a double crown, which both had red and white and represented the combined kingdom. Some other signs and symbols of their royalty, of the royal regalia, is they had a crook, which was used by shepherds, and it symbolized the king's protection. Then they had a flail, which they used to whip people, and it symbolized the king's ability to punish not just the people, but his enemies. Then they had a mace, which was a stick with a stone ball at the end of it, and an ankh, which is a cross that meant life. And you should, when you read this book, the pages for this lesson, you'll see pictures of them in that book, so you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Their power, though, like I said, was unlimited, given by the God, but they wanted to show their power, and they wanted to make sure people knew how powerful they were. And so a lot of their symbols were of lions or the Sphinx, where, symbolize their powers. That's why sometimes you'll get the head of the man on the lion or with the Sphinx. You also had, the bull, which was a symbol of power. And then they would have these festivals called the Sed festivals, where they did a lot of physical activities. They would run, they would show their strength in many different ways, and through many different activities that were designed to show just how powerful the pharaoh was. The pharaoh also would create his centralized government. The government had multiple people underneath him, but the king made all of the important decisions. The ministers were the ones who actually carried them out. So the pharaoh would make the decision, and the orders would be carried out by the ministers. And there was different departments, okay? There was almost always two viziers or advisors, and they were one for Upper Egypt and one for Lower Egypt. And then, depending on different locations that may be part of the empire, but not completely self-ruled, or not completely governed by Egypt, you would have viceroys. And for a very long period of time, you had two. That was Nubia and Kush, and they were semi-autonomous, self-governing parts that fell under Egyptian rule, and so they would have viceroys there. Then you had the army and different leaders of the army and the navy, but it all fell under one general army ruler. You had the priests, as we talked about, who were very important, controlled the temples and a lot of power with them. Then you had department overseers, people who controlled the treasury, people who controlled the granaries. Back then, the power was in your grain and how much food you were able to provide. And then they had, people who were in charge of, royal declarations and other things. So lastly, finally, you got down to the people, right? So the people, the average, everyday, normal person, just trying to live their life in Egypt, had to pay taxes. And in a world where money wasn't necessarily that important, they would pay their taxes in either goods, the food they made, the animals they caught, the hunting they did, or through work. They would literally go work for a certain amount of time to pay their taxes. And even though, they had to pay taxes and life wasn't necessarily great for them, they were, for the most part, treated fairly well. And one of the reasons for this is because there was some power the people had on the kings in their afterlife. The king died and the people just refused to bury him in the tomb or different things that could cause them problems for their afterlife. So mostly they were treated well. They had fair trials that were in local and district courts. However, there were criminal punishments. And for your very serious crimes, you could have mutilations. They could cut arms or hands or feet off. They could cut your nose off. But for lesser crimes, they had floggings or fines, or sometimes you might be exiled. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the pharaohs and the kings and how the government and the people worked. And hopefully you're reading this and not just hearing it from me, because it's good to see it and hear it as well. So thanks. Have a great day.